Okay, let's finish up these notes by looking at sustainable agriculture. So we saw conventional, industrial, and now we're going to look at sustainable. So this is the opposite. So sustainable agriculture, this is just a quote. In order to be a sustainable farm, you have to satisfy human food and fiber needs. So you have to actually be able to grow enough or raise enough of whatever product it is you're trying to sell in order to satisfy the food needs. And then fiber needs is going to be things like cotton, that you're growing enough, or wool, that you have enough to meet whatever the need actually is. It enhances the quality environment rather than degrading it. It has efficient use of non-renewable resources. So instead of wasting fossil fuels, they are using conservation practices. It sustains economic viability. So it has to be able to pay the people who are working on the farm. It has to be able to help out the community. And it enhances the quality of life. So it's good for the quality of life for the animals, as well as the individuals who are eating them. So there are 3 pillars to sustainable agriculture. The 3 pillars are the economy, the environment, and the community. Just like a 3-legged stool cannot stand unless it has all 3 legs, sustainable agriculture cannot be considered sustainable agriculture if it does not have all 3 pillars. So you have to be good for the economy, you have to be good for the environment, and you have to be good for the community. If you can't meet the needs for all 3 of those, then it's not a sustainable farm. If it does 2, but not the other, it's still not sustainable. Now, like I said, there are some farms that are to the extreme of animal cruelty, really bad practices, overuse of, antibiotics, pesticides, all that stuff that we saw with industrial farms. There's the farms that are to the extreme of that. There are farms that are to the extreme with sustainable, and then there are some that are in the middle. But in order to be a true sustainable farm, you have to meet the needs of all 3 of those. So hopefully you have those 3 written down. Next slide. So to be economically sustainable, that means it has to provide a secure living, and it has to be good for all. Don't write the good for all down at the bottom. I should unbold that, but just write that it has to provide a secure living. That's what the economic sustainability is looking at. If you can have a farm that has all natural practices and all that stuff, that's great. But if you can't pay the people who are working on your farm, then your farm's probably not going to last too long. So it's important that not only are you doing things in the best way possible, but you have to be realistic and understand there is the business side of things, and you've got to be able to make it as a business as well. So economically sustainable, it provides a secure living. So it's going to be good to the people who work within the farm, and that's what I meant for good for all, but you don't have to write that. Environmentally sound. So it's basically just going to protect the quality of the soil, air, and the water. We looked at how monocultures can be bad for the soil, and so we're about to look at some of the practices sustainable farms do in order to protect the quality of soil. You also are going to have less water and air pollution because they're going to use less chemicals. They're going to do everything they can to make things as clean and environmentally friendly as possible. So to be environmentally sound, it just preserves the quality of soil, water, and air. Okay, hopefully you're done with that. Environmentally sound, it's modeled on natural systems. So it is not natural for those pigs to be in those little teeny tiny cages. It's not natural for a pig to never see sunlight or touch actual ground. That is definitely not what that pig is used to. So if you're modeling after a natural system, you're not going to have cages like that. You're going to have pastures. You're going to have some free roam thing or free range, so that way animals can move about. You're going to feed them not just corn, but you're going to feed them what they're actually supposed to be eating. I know with your, what's it called? The creamery place, Simply Natural. They have a dietitian who actually looks at the food that they make for their cows to make sure that it has all the nutrients that they need. So it's just always modeled after the natural system, trying to make the healthiest. They don't add any antibiotics into any feed. unless the animal is actually sick and a vet has come in and prescribed that and there was no other option. So that's what we mean by the natural systems. Socially sustainable. So your sustainable farms are going to be good for communities. Your industrial farms tend to run community farms or the smaller scale farms out of business because it's just so hard to compete with prices. But your sustainable farms are going to be good for the community. Again, just going back to Simply Natural, like they invite the community in, you can take tours. It's not running anyone out of business, it's helping the area out, is providing jobs. So because of that, it is considered to be a sustainable farm because it's sustainable in every aspect. I bet a lot of you are wanting ice cream right about now. Okay, so good for communities is all you had to write. If you aren't done with that, then my goodness, people, it's the end of the year, write faster. So how to farm sustainably. Now we're going to look at a couple of the practices. They do something called multi-cropping. Multi-cropping is the opposite of a monoculture. If you have a monoculture, mono means one, so you just have one giant field of only one crop. If you are multi-cropping, then you have a lot of different crops, hence multi. And I am talking about the screen hasn't changed, so wait 1 second. There we go. Sorry about that. So multi-cropping is when you have multiple crops all together, and that's going to be good for a few reasons that we'll look at. So they usually have their whatever waste products can be composted. So say you're taking the corn and you have the corn that you take off, but then you have all the silk and the actual like stalk of the corn. Well, that can be composted, so that way you aren't producing as much waste. You're turning that waste into a good natural fertilizer, and that good natural fertilizer will also reduce the chances of, eutrophication from occurring, which is a very good thing. Crops are rotated. This is a practice called crop rotation that you definitely do need to know about. So crop rotation is when you plant one type of crop, let's say it's corn, and then the next year or the next growing season, you plant a new crop. So I would have corn this year, and then I plant soybeans next year. Well, what's the purpose in doing that? Well, it's going to preserve the nutrients in the soil. If corn uses up a lot of nutrient A, that 1 year it's going to take nutrient A out of the soil. But if I know I'm replacing it next growing season with soybeans that are going to use nutrient B, then while the soybean is planted for that new growing season, nutrient A has time to build up back into the soil. So you could think about it as every year you rotate out the crop you're planting. So corn 1 year, soybeans the next year. That would be your example of it. In a minute, you're going to have to do a farming practice pro and con thing, and it's going to ask for an example of crop rotation, and there's not going to be one listed in your packet because it simply is you just picking two crops like soybeans or corn and you flip-flopping them each year. So you can come up with that on your own. Animals are treated fairly, so the animals are treated well. They aren't going to be de-beaked. They aren't going to be abused, basically, which you do have occurring in some of these industrial farms. So they're treated very fairly. They're not giving antibiotics if they're not needed. So there's not just a constant dose of medicine added into their food all the time, and because there's no need for a constant dose of antibiotics added to their food. If you are treating animals well and you are letting them grow in a natural environment, then they're not going to be sick all the time, and so you don't need to constantly treat them for stuff. They're fed properly, so they're not going to be fed ground up parts of meat that they wouldn't normally eat. They're not going to be fed only corn because animals eat more than just corn. They're going to have that good diet to keep them healthy. So that's how some of their farming practices. So I'll give one more second before I move on. I just want to throw out from here on out, there's not that many notes left, but any day that we don't finish notes in class, The lesson will not be picked up the next day. So if you ever don't get the notes, you've got to make sure you go online and get them independently. So if for some reason the PowerPoint's not finished by the end of class, which should not be the case, but it will be homework for you to finish the notes on your own. Okay, in conclusion, agriculture has accomplished a lot of stuff. This screen's still waiting, but at least with this next screen, you don't have to write. So agriculture's accomplished a lot. We've grown a lot in a lot of really good ways, so we're very thankful for that. There's still a lot of problems to solve, both with your old and your new types of farming. So traditional farming obviously has its issues, but sustainable farming also has some issues too, some kinks that they have to work out. So sustainable agriculture, the whole goal is to solve the problems of the conventional agriculture without creating new problems. Something that happens a lot with the industrial farming is they were trying to solve a problem of not making enough money or not making enough food. And while they tried to solve that problem, they created a bunch of new ones with the health issues and all that stuff. So sustainability is just fixing that without creating new ones. So this is a chart you do need to write down. Just a summary of the comparison. And this is the last slide as well. So conventional farms are your really big ones. Remember, conventional, traditional, industrial. Those are all the same thing. These are large-scale farms, like really, really, really big ones. They rely on heavy machinery and not people. So if they can replace a person with a machine, that's their goal because you don't have to pay that machine. They use a lot of fertilizer and a lot of pesticides, excessive amounts. They have a monoculture of only one crop, and we know that's bad because it can lead to poor nutrients, which increases your use of fertilizer and increases your use of pesticides. They have a lot of fossil fuels because it's all about shipping and flying things all over the place, and so we already know the issue with using fossil fuels, and their goal is to produce large amounts of food, and that is obviously a good thing about it. So that's a summary of conventional farms. Your summary of sustainable. These are small to medium-sized farms, so they aren't quite as big, and that's just fine. They rely on human labor rather than machines. That's not to say they can't use any machines, but they're going to have more job opportunities. And as y'all get out of school, you'll realize the more jobs, the better. So they do have more job opportunities. They use less or no fertilizer and pesticides, and that's because they have alternative things. So instead of fertilizer, they can use compost. And instead of doing monocultures to reduce or to increase the need of fertilizer, they can do things like crop rotation and multi-cropping. That way that it's not as big of a problem. They use natural predators to reduce pests. You're about to read about that. But instead of spraying a toxic chemical that's known to cause cancer, there's some bugs like little mites that can get on crops. And if you release ladybugs, the ladybugs don't harm the crop and they eat the little mites. So there are natural predators that you can use to instead of a pesticide. Like mulch, for instance, instead of spraying stuff to kill weeds, if you lay mulch down, now that's going to be more work. But that's another job that you can hire someone to do. But the mulch will smother the weeds, and that way you're replacing that toxic chemical. They grow a lot of diverse crops, and they sell locally to people. So all of those are things that are sustainable. So I will let y'all pause the video while you finish writing out this list. And then your next assignment is going to be a reading, an agriculture reading, where you fill out the pro and con chart. Now, don't sigh or roll your eyes at this. It's very, very simple. A handout is laid out, titled, and bold what each thing is, and it goes in order. The pro of this is, a con of this is, and all you're doing is just moving the pro and con information to an easy-to-read handout. So it's very, very simple. It shouldn't take you long to do at all. If you don't get it done quickly, it's because you weren't paying attention, you were talking too much. Please don't write on my handout, only write on the pro and con chart because I reuse the handouts to save paper. So just follow along and then you just move your examples over. Be quiet, get your work done, that way you can get it done quickly. And then if you have any extra time, then you can quietly be more social, but get your work done first. So I will go ahead and let y'all pause this to finish writing and then end the video.